Here is our.
Well, good morning, everyone, to our ReSourceYYC Lunch and Learn. Today, we have two amazing speakers for you. We have Jeff and Angie, who are going to be having more of a conversation with everyone who's joined in. And I hope anybody who listens after gets to take advantage of any great information that comes out of this. So if people aren't aware, ReSourceYYC is a co-working community for professionals. So we have private office spaces, dedicated desks, and virtual office options, as well as day drop-ins if you ever just need a space to work that's not at home, which people are starting to do. So, and Angie and Jeff have both used our space before and can attest it's a nice space to be in. So I hope everyone enjoys this presentation, and if you ever need a place to try out, come to ReSourceYYC.
Thanks, Rose. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. We do intend for today to be mostly a conversation, a fireside chat, as Jeff called it, between the two of us, but I wanted to set the stage a little bit around around the topic, our Sage leadership in particular, which is my background coming into this. So we're just get things rolling, and then we'll come back off screen and have a conversation. So today's title hopefully was intriguing for you. We're going to talk about getting shit done, optimizing performance through human centric sage leadership. So I'm going to talk a bit about sage leadership, but before that, there's just a couple of questions we want you to consider, and we encourage you to also let us know if there's questions that you have that you'd like us to try and weave into today's conversation. So the first question we have for you is, are you feeling normal yet? Does it feel like we're back to normal? Feel free to reflect on that in the chat if you like. But I think a lot of us are supposed to be, I think we were feeling like we'd be back to normal by now, but I'm not feeling it. So how do you stay focused when the world is in a blender? In the description, we talked about that. There's so much going on right now in the world, and it just seems like every time we turn around, there's something new that's causing us to spin again. So with all of that going on, are you performing at your best? How do you feel about that? What's getting, and if you're not, what is your biggest obstacle right now? Anyone have any kind of thoughts on that they want to share? What's getting in your way of maybe performing at your best? Yeah, see, quiet. Okay, I'll keep going. That's okay. I think I'm getting in my own way most of the time. would be my answer to that. So apologies, this got cut off a little bit, but I thought we should introduce ourselves. So Jeff, do you want to go first? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So Jeff Griffiths, some of you know me, I know some of you. I'm the co-founder of a small but mighty little consulting firm here in Calgary called Workforce Strategies International. Management consulting in the workforce space has been a challenge over the last few years. People were in survival mode instead of growing mode. So that's been that's been a real issue for us over the last couple or 3 years. But I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm not about to stop. And it's good to see you all here. Your turn, Angie.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so my name's Angie Alexander. I've presented a couple of times here at ReSourceYYC. I'm a born and raised Calgarian, and I have an engineering background. I worked for over 20 years in oil and gas here in Calgary. Always over the years found myself drawn into the people-centric type work. I was very fascinated by how different disciplines approached problems, about how they speak different languages and often are talking across each other. So I always was that person in the middle trying to translate and help others understand and kind of bring it all together and present it in a way that everyone could understand. And then in 2017, I had the gift given to me of being able to choose what I want to do with the rest of my my career. And so I've really stepped into this leadership and team effectiveness space and coaching. I was fortunate enough to come across Positive Intelligence, which is what we're going to talk a little bit about today, which is a mental fitness program. And I'm certified as a mental fitness coach on top of my my other coaching background and team effectiveness work. So I bring all of that together with my technical background to help leaders and their teams work in the best way that they can. And I've worked a lot with individuals as well in this program, and that's how Jeff and I met. I think I'd have to, Jeff can speak to what drew him to working with me, but I'm sure it was, I think the first time we met was a presentation I did for ReSourceYYC, and he's since come and done the boot camp that I offer, and we continue to meet a group of us once a month to continue the mental fitness journey. So do you want to add to that, Jeff, before I move on?
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing around as a consultant in various forms of, psychology, behavioral psychology, industrial psychology for a long time, and a lot of the concepts that are presented through the PQ really resonated, and took a lot of the the theoretical stuff and made it a lot more personal and accessible. And that's what brought me in. And I said, well, let's go through the boot camp and just see what's there. And it's been really helpful, and find there's nuggets of it that you can just apply in almost any situation all through the day to keep you centered and focused.
Yeah, Jeff's been a fun add to my group in terms of our ongoing conversations. He's, for any of you that have met him, he's got little quips and ways of putting things that have made their way into my vernacular. I don't know if that's good or bad, but anyways, it is. Oh, I'm getting feedback, Rosemary says. Okay, is that true? Are you all hearing feedback from me when I speak?
Good for me.
Okay, all right. Oh, good. Okay, so the work that I've been doing has taken me, evolved into what I'm calling sage leadership. And so I'm going to show you here, I have a definition of what a sage leader means to me. So it's a sage leader is doing the work to maintain and improve their mental fitness so that they can lead from their powers. And we're going to talk about these powers of empathy for self and others, a fascinated curiosity, a desire for creativity, a strong purpose, and decisive and fearless action. So I've done a whole presentation for ReSourceYYC on sage leadership. If you're interested, you can go in and watch that. I think it's in the background, but we wanted to set a little bit of the tone. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about mental fitness, just a smidge, to give you an idea of what we mean by sage leadership and the powers of the sage. And then we're going to go into, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll just have a bit of a chat. Jeff's got lots of great examples of how he's applied the sage powers, and we'll just have a back and forth. And we really would love for you to weigh in along the way if you have questions or you find that there's stories coming up for yourself. So I have to introduce this man. He's the powerhouse behind Positive Intelligence. He wrote a book called Positive Intelligence. I highly recommend it. He also does a really great TEDx talk on his work. So he's a lecturer, and he's also a coach to CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. So that's really where this work came from for him. So we're going to talk about the two sides of our brain. We're not going to get into a lot of the neuroscience, but this is really, it's like this war going on in our head between like the inner Darth Vaders, which we call the saboteurs, and the inner Jedi, which is the sage. So it's this constant back and forth between these two sides of our brain, and the saboteurs, and you can see out by the images there, they have names like the controller or the avoider or the hyperachiever or the stickler or the hypervigilant, the restless. They all, as you hear those names, you think, yeah, okay, I get that. I can feel what those voices might sound like in my head. And they're led by the judge. The judge is our master saboteur. We all have it. It has sometimes it's really loud and nasty. Other times it's quite like sits back in the corner and looks down its nose at you. But It's all those voices that are telling you that you don't belong, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're any version of all that. We all probably can hear that voice in our head. So we're not going to dive into the saboteurs today, but just know that they're there. And the way that we combat them is through these inner Jedi, the true essence of who we are, which is our sage. And we're going to talk about the sage powers and how we use them to combat. Now there's, Jeff used the term PQ, which is positive intelligence quotient. And we, through the boot camp, we practice building our mental fitness muscles through PQ reps, which is mental fitness gym exercises. So again, we're not going to get into that, but that's how that's the shift, how we move from these voices that are running all the negative stories and negative emotion and be able to tap into our true inner essence. So again, we're not going to get into all that today, but know that that's the work that we do to get there. So just a quick intro to the sage. It's the region of the brain that creates all of our positive emotions, the peace and calm, clear-headed focus, creativity, that big picture thinking. And it operates from what we call the sage perspective. So we'll talk about that as well in a moment. So one of my favorite ways to look at the world is through the sage perspective. So here are the sage powers. The first one is empathize. Empathize is about having unconditional love for yourself and others. It's the most, in my opinion, the most important sage power. And for many of us, it's the hardest one to tap into, especially that unconditional love of self. But it becomes very important as leaders in particular to be able to lead from a place of empathy and empathize, that unconditional love instead of, it's the antidote to that judge. The second one is what we call explore. Explore is all about love of learning and finding things out. I always picture a child on the beach turning over rocks and what's here, and you have no expectation of what you're going to see. You just look and find out. And so when we have that love of learning with no agenda, we just want to know more. That's the explore power of the sage. Innovate is about creativity, the love of creativity. When we're in our innovate sage, we are thinking about all the possibilities beyond even the obvious ones. That's, we've probably all had that situation where we've been able to play with ideas and somebody throws out something that's like kind of wild and crazy, but everyone's like, yeah, that's kind of fun. And that makes me think of this and that makes me think of this. And then at the end, you come back to things that are more realistic, but you're not shutting down those ideas initially. So again, we have to be in our sage, not run by our saboteurs. We've all had, again, that experience where you throw out an idea and someone's like, that'll never work. We tried that before, it'll never work. And it shuts everybody right down, right? That's no fun. So we want to be able to tap into that. Navigate is about purpose and meaning. It's that internal compass that drives all of our decision. And we can see, in the future, if we could sit back and look at what's going on today, what's really important today. Oftentimes, we're so caught up in something that's immediate. And when we can sit back, and sometimes we hear the expressions, go stand on the balcony. In the mental fitness world, we sometimes go even further than that. We consult with our wiser elder self who's sitting on the dock fishing or whatever, and just say, what do I need to know right now? What's really important right now? So it's those check-ins with our inner self that help us drive forward and not get so caught up sometimes in what's going on today. And then the final one is about activate. And this is really about being able to move forward without all the distraction of life going on around you. I always picture the Jedi. I can't make the sounds like Jeff can, but that Jedi who's so focused. Exactly. That Jedi that can handle, like, it's so focused that no matter what's coming, they're just like, all the way through. So those are the 5 powers. And it's all driven through this idea of the sage perspective. And that's that every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift and an opportunity. So this can sometimes be quite challenging. Like in the moment, the saboteurs will tell us this is bad, bad, bad. And there's nothing good about this. But the reality is we've all had experiences where when we, step back and look at it, I got laid off in 2017. And that was like one of the most difficult times in my life. And if it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't be where I am today. I was given the gift of being able to really assess what I want to do. And now I'm happier than I've ever been with the work that I'm doing. And I wouldn't have had that if someone hadn't given me the gift of a layoff. So I appreciate that. And we learn too that we have to build our muscles to be able to deal with this. You know, some things are so heavy and we're not quite strong enough yet to be able to deal with it or see the gift. But having that kind of confidence and faith that we will be able to, you know, turn it into a gift at some point. All right. So just to go back to the saboteurs, they're responsible for all the negative emotions. And sometimes we think, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? Like if it weren't for my stress and anxiety, I wouldn't get shit done, right? So absolutely, there's a certain amount of that, but ultimately it's the positive emotions that come from the sage that are going to motivate you, not necessarily to success. So let me say this again. Our saboteurs might generate some short-term success, but not happiness, right? We talk to a lot of people in really high-level CEO type positions who are successful, definitely not happy because they've been driven so hard by these negative emotions. And you'll actually get your highest success and sustained happiness if you are moving through your sage perspective and sage powers. So that's all I have. I will stop sharing my screen. Hopefully that sets a bit of the context of what we're here to talk about. So yeah, Jeff, I want to turn it over to you and you can take all of that theory and tell us about why it's important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the key thing for me coming out of the boot camp and applying to life, the sage perspective and the sage powers for me, it encompasses the whole entrepreneurial mindset. And the saboteurs are intrinsically negative and stop you from doing things. Sometimes that's a good thing, right? Stopping you from doing something really patently stupid. A lot of the time I found that's the saboteurs that actually stop you from taking advantage of opportunities that you don't even recognize as opportunities, because they're there to protect you. And so the embracing that idea that, which is, from the sage perspective of positivity, for me has been really helpful, because it's not an automatic thing, right? We're spring loaded to trust the saboteurs and the judges, because that's instinctive behavior. And what I found, and again through the boot camp, was it's that break moment that happens through the PQ reps or whatever it is you're doing that allows you to make that clean break, and then allow your better judgment, the saboteurs, push them out of the way and allow the sage stuff to come through. But you need that break, right? Because instinctively what you're going to do is do what you've always done, and that tends to be protect yourself, right? It's human nature. The way this has worked, I guess, for me is, you can see how the different pieces of the sage power have, how you apply them in everyday situations as entrepreneurs. So like the empathize piece, like for me, and I have good, Angie could talk about this, because I went into the boot camp saying I'm surrounded by idiots. Right. And that's, guess what? Right. That's actually, I've come to realize that's one of my, it's the judge, but it's also one of the other saboteurs, this hyperachiever, that it gets really, really annoyed when there's any delay, or when people aren't moving as fast as I would like them to, or anything else. The empathize thing is the first one, as you said, Angie, where it's that, take that second, breathe, realize that everybody is trying to do their best work most of the time. And if they're not going in the same direction as you are going, or doing what you would prefer that they did, they probably have the, a damn good reason for it. And you need to respect that. And so the empathize thing is, for me, is the first one that hits, because it overcomes the judge and it overcomes that hyperachiever. And I'm finding I'm using it with clients that piss me off, with business partners that piss me off, with suppliers that piss me off. Right? I'm not surrounded by idiots anymore. I'm surrounded by other people who are also trying to achieve what they're trying to achieve, which may not necessarily be what I want to achieve, but that's okay, right? It's been very helpful in gaining that perspective. And I find I get a lot more done now because I'm not constantly angry at the idiots.
So I want to talk a little bit about, I want to go back a little bit to what you said about how we're pre-wired to, to the saboteurs are there and have been there since we were children, to protect us from the world. And we just haven't outgrown them like we do some of the other things that we need when we're kids. I think of it as, from a neuroscience perspective, then we, like we said, one side of the brain is the saboteur side and one side is the sage side. And we've been running down this neural pathway to the saboteur for years, and we don't pause. And we're just, I always picture myself running down a path in the forest. And at some point something happens and I get to choose if I go left or right. And if I don't pause, I don't even see the right-hand side, right? I don't see that other pathway because it's not very well worn. And I've been running down that same path to the negative saboteur side so often. So what we learn to do is to, like Jeff said, to pause, sometimes just that pause to say, hold on, I don't need to go down that path. There is another path over here. And the more that I practice, the more that I go down that path, the easier it becomes to it's not even a conscious choice in some cases anymore. I've practiced enough times that now that other path is kind of worn over and I'm grown over, and now I'm going down that other one. So that's a lot of the practice that we're doing, because that sage side has always been with us. It's the and we do an exercise where we visualize the child. And it's really that child that hasn't been overcome by all these, saboteurs that create this wall around us. And we get to actually, I use the description of a child on the beach, and that's really what it is. It's not that we want to be children per se, but we want to embody what children bring, that pure essence of caring and listening. And, you think about kids, when they ask questions, they ask a lot of questions. And they really listen in most cases to the answer, right? We don't do that. We don't listen. And that's the empathy and curiosity side of things. So yeah. And I've observed in Jeff, as he said, like the first couple of times he came to our, the first sessions that we had, this energy around him, that as much as we laugh about him being surrounded by idiots and all of that, but there was an edge to that, right? That came from his judge. And so I've observed that he can still joke about that, but there's a lot less edge to the comments. So
yeah, and it's not because the people around me have changed.
Right.
They're still idiots. I'm just much better at accepting that I'm an idiot too.
Right. Or another way of looking at that is that we're all perfectly imperfect humans. And all of us have saboteurs. For me, I know that's often what helps me is if someone is really challenging me, and my judge maybe doesn't use the same language that Jeff's does, but you're that same sort of, you're an idiot type conversation. And if I'm really getting triggered, it means that their saboteurs, their saboteurs are so strong that they're getting at me. And if I can pause and think, can you imagine being on the other side of that? Like, what must it be like to live with those saboteurs and that judge all the time? Because if I'm feeling it that strongly, can guarantee that they are too. And so that really helps with that full circle.
Have you ever found, Angie, that when you're in those conversations with an idiot, and they're triggering you that way,
Yeah.
that you can actually open the door to their sage side and give them an out by just directing the conversation that way.
100%.
And then all of a sudden the whole tone of the conversation changes and things become very positive and collaborative because you've opened that door that they didn't even know was there.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of
takes them off guard as well.
It does when you actually listen. I think when you so I think of it as like both the saboteurs and the sage can be very contagious. So we all we know what it's like to be in a conversation where the saboteurs are creating that contagion, and it's just right, like it's just getting worse with each of you letting your saboteurs lead, the contagion effect just continues to go. But if I go in and I make the effort to be in sage, and that also can be very contagious because I don't feed their saboteur, right? I don't let my saboteur go back at theirs, and I will if I come in with like questions, or I'm actually listening to you. It does it like their saboteurs don't quite know what to do with that, right? And it takes the energy out of the saboteurs for sure. 100%. Good question, Jeff.
Yeah, well, I find it even in again, as entrepreneurs, we're constantly in sales conversations, whether we realize it or not, right? And you can see the saboteurs come out and the defenses come up with clients because they've been spring loaded not to trust us. I mean, we're consultants, we're selling snake oil, right? Consultant, I'll show me your watch, I'll tell you what time it is. And it's, but by being on the other side of it, on the sage side, it's inherently helpful and it's not salesy. And you can get into a much deeper conversation with the client or the prospect, not because you want to sell them something, because you actually feel like helping them. And if helping them means referring them to somebody else, we've done that. And with no qualms about doing it, because we're trying to approach the world from that perspective about being human and being helpful. And in the end, what it does is it generates all kinds of trust. And, and that's the currency, that's the coin of the realm. If you're a consultant, is trust. So it's been really helpful for us, in terms of sales conversations, in terms of collaborations with other firms that we're starting on 2 this year. And they're huge. They're going to, like 10x the size of our company. And they never would have happened if we'd have gone into this to fight for what was ours instead of working for what was, the greater good with these things. And it's really the sage perspective, because again, 2 years ago, I probably would have blown both of those deals.
Your idiot would have blown the deal.
My inner idiot would have come through, and I would have blown those deals. That's why after 20 years in business, I'm still a startup. It's because of the saboteurs.
Yeah, but look out now, look out world. So hey, let's go to the explore power. Let's talk about, so that's the fascinated anthropologist. That's the love of curiosity, love of learning. Can you tell us a story about how that's helped you?
Well, and I think again, as a portion of what we're trying to do is always come up with new ways of doing things. So there's a research component to our work. And I mean, explore and innovate are kind of tied together. They have to be. And again, in the past, I would have been more interested in coming up with an answer that fit my hypothesis, as opposed to just, let's see where the data takes us. Let's see what this is telling us. And if it takes me down a completely different pathway and changes all of these, notions that I've had for, 20 or 30 years of doing this, well, that's actually a good thing, right? I mean, that's the whole, that's science, right? And so we're finding this idea of just being completely open to all these crazy ideas is helping us again, to generate new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things. I mean, it's great from a business perspective. And I think it just makes us way more fun to hang around with, because we're always talking about weird new shit that we're coming up with and thinking about. And sometimes it is shit, and sometimes it's actually useful stuff. But if we hadn't gone down this explore pathway, we'd have never found it in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun, and it makes that whole, process of discovery a whole lot more fun.
Yeah, the sage has that love of learning, and that love that really be okay with uncovering things that were unexpected, because the sage perspective says, who knows what's good or what's bad. And so, if we're afraid of uncovering something that doesn't fit our current hypothesis or has to change something that we're on, if we're afraid of that, saboteurs are always driven through fear of something. So if we're afraid of that, oh, well, we're going to have to double back and redo the work, or we're going to have to, I'm going to look bad because it's something I didn't, I didn't know. Whereas we're in our sage, we're okay with that. We're like, cool, let's that we're going to come out with something better in the end if we're more open to that. So
there's a process that again, another consultant that I ran into a year or so ago, that they do it, then they call it thinking out loud.
Yeah.
So they just throw all of their weird ideas out there for the world and find out if they, if they make sense, if they resonate, if it's, if it's just, the crazy voices in your own head that are telling you this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so by doing that, and by being vulnerable to that, which is part of these, sage powers, is I'm fine being wrong, but I don't know I'm wrong until I show it to somebody else and they can tell me I'm wrong, right? Where in the past we never would have done that.
Yeah.
And it's created interesting relationships. It's created interesting collaborations with other people, other companies. It just really, really enriches the whole journey that we're on, because being an entrepreneur can be awfully lonely. Let's face it. And this makes it a lot less lonely. Even if the only people that are showing up are to tell you that you're wrong, at least they showed up.
That's right. So Jeff, I'm curious because even within your partnership, you're the only one that's done this work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, so how are you finding that this is like, how do you get others to play with you in this way?
You don't give them a choice. Right. It's not, it's very, very, yes. No, you act the way you act, right? Now, one of my business partners is a clinical psychologist. So he gets this anyway, right? But from the science end of it. And my other business partner was a prison guard. So he gets it too. Right. And so by being open this way, it doesn't give you just don't give the other individual the choice of playing, because you just walk them down that pathway. And and no matter what comes out that's negative, you find a way to turn it into positive and push in that direction anyway. So it doesn't mean that the path is easy. Sometimes the mountain's pretty steep, but it doesn't mean that because what is it they say, as an entrepreneur, you're on the right road because it's always uphill, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, it's supposed to be hard, but it's valuable and it's useful. And I found over time, our conversations internally, I'm not surrounded by idiots anymore. We're getting much deeper, richer conversations. We're having way more cool ideas, finding new ways of doing things and working together in a much more open environment. And it's all because of taking this intrinsic positivity that comes from that perspective.
You know, you're making me think of so with the innovate power, which is the next one, you know, we talk about the creativity piece. And one of the basic tenets of the innovate power that the sage just knows is that nobody's 100% wrong, right? There's always 10% right in every idea, every conversation. And unfortunately, what happens is our saboteurs usually jump on the 90% that's wrong, even maybe the 10% that's wrong, right? So somebody will suggest something or say something, and the immediate response is, you're wrong, and this is why you're wrong. Whereas if we're in our sage and thinking about it, we can look at something that someone has said and think, okay, there's 10% right here somewhere. And what is that? So if we're open to that, and again, if you think about how you can influence others, how impactful is it if instead of saying, Jeff, your idea is dumb, it doesn't make sense, we've tried it before, it's not going to work, versus, hey, Jeff, what I like about your idea is, and I find that 10% that I like, and then build off of that. It's very powerful. It's I mean, we use it in the creating new ideas, generating ideas, but it can also be used in conflict management. The person feels heard right away as soon as you say what I like. And you're not saying you like their idea. There's a subtlety in the language there. It's not, Jeff, I like your idea. It's what I like about your idea. I'm going to find that nugget of what I like and build off of that. So it, again, takes their saboteurs down a notch. Because as soon as I say, I don't like your idea, yeah, that's right. The shield comes up, the saboteurs are right there. Whereas you can disarm that by letting them feel heard. And you never kind of know where the ideas are going to go because you have to be listening. You have to be open to be like, okay, I need to listen to everything that you're saying, because I know there's something in there that's worth grabbing onto. So have you found that, Jeff? Do you use that approach?
Yeah, and it's hard. And like I said, it's a muscle that you have to work on. And part of it, I mean, we live in a polarized society where, you know, we all have tribes, and, you know, and so, you know, you have to check someone's membership card before deciding if they have a good idea. And, you know, and I that's kind of stupid, but it's really hard because we're spring loaded to grab onto the negative and reject. So it's constant practice. And anybody here ran into Russ Stratton over at Blue Gem here in Calgary? He's another consultant, a colleague of mine. They do all kinds of work with actors. We're working with leaders, and it's all improv. So they use improv actors. And the first rule of improv is always, you never say no. No matter what the other person does, your answer is always yes and you build on what they're coming up with, because otherwise the whole act dies, right? So they do all this really cool stuff with executive teams, teaching them that process of improv, to always grab onto something in what the other person said, grab it, yes, and build on it, and then throw it back. And you never get to say no. Yeah, that's me. Right. But that whole, you have to practice it. It's really hard to practice. You know, we had a situation even this week where we're going down, you know, almost went down a negative rabbit hole with the business partners, you know, and I have a colleague who, you know, English is not his first language. He's a South African. He's, you know, he speaks Afrikaans. He's very direct. He has a concept that he's working on. And the languages he's using doesn't resonate with me, because for me, what he's saying means something entirely different. I know what he's saying, but it doesn't mean that from my perspective. And the judgy saboteur guy that used to sit in this chair a year and a half ago would have said, Dirk, you're full of shit. We're not going to do that. Except now I say, well, I like the concept. I like this idea. here's, and what if we did it, added this to it? And so we went off, and we've got a whole new product line coming out now because of this conversation, where it would have been in the past far too easy just to say, no, that's bullshit, we're not going to do it. And this is, again, it's potentially, massive growth and collaborations with other firms and everything else that's coming out of this that we would not have had if we didn't apply that principle. And so it's fun. And I don't even know if these guys realize that that's what I did to them.
Hey, Sue, I see you're off mute. You have a question?
Yeah, well, I was thinking, I've just been listening to what you're talking about here, and I was thinking, Angie, your first analogy there around the different pathways and which way you go, it almost reminds me of that old Robert Frost poem, the one we all had to memorize somewhere back in elementary school of, was it two roads diverged in woods, and I took the one less traveled, and it's made all the difference.
Yeah,
I'm sure I've missed a word or two in there, but that general thing.
Mhm.
And then I was starting to think what you're talking about with this concept of innovate. And one of the expressions that comes to mind is yesterday's excellence is today's standard, is tomorrow's mediocrity.
Mhm.
And part of this is about the need to continue our learning. So what I learned 20 years ago, it was great. It was cutting edge thinking at the time. And what's happening right now, and I find with an awful lot of my work, we still have the same foundation, we have the same fundamentals, the laws of physics don't change. However, we learn more and more all the time and new ways to apply it. I find being much more with the pandemic and being more online, it's given me way more opportunity to work with some international folks. And as Jeff brings up, they've got different ideas, they have different vocabulary. And what it's causing is advancement in how we think about things. And so that part's really cool. And I find sometimes, I also have a small business and I work with my clients, and sometimes it's like, yep, been there, done that. Yep, have tried this one before, but it's like, hey, there's a new way of thinking about it. Or, what we learned here won't apply in this situation, but maybe this nuance will, or this is the general direction that we're trying to go. And so I like a lot of this idea of, I don't know what to call it, pilot testing things and then rolling forward. And a lot of what you're talking about with Sage leadership is how to overcome that resistance to change within organizations. Particularly ones that have done the same thing the same way for the last 50 years. And how do you bring that forward in terms of our change management and getting people on board to even try something new?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do these days, right? Is working, working with individuals like Jeff, but also within organizations. The more we can bring this kind of thinking and this approach to leaders, especially, but their teams. And as Jeff has described, it doesn't necessarily take everybody to have done the work. You just need a few key people who can start, infecting other people with it in terms of their. But I think it's, when you're the consultant coming in with the new ideas, it is definitely harder, but it's so important for us to be able to go in with an open mind and ask questions and use these. They're like Jedi mind tricks, really, aren't they, Jeff? Because it disarms their own saboteurs. There's nothing worse than as a consultant coming in and saying that I have the answer for your problem that you haven't even told me what the problem is yet, right? So, it's asking the questions, drawing things out, which are things that we know we're supposed to do as consultants. And I think these tools give us that ability to make sure that we come in to a conversation. And Jeff, we can talk about the preempting the saboteurs in a minute, but we come into a conversation as much as possible with our saboteurs. They're always going to come with us. Like, we never get rid of them, but knowing how to calm them down before we come in and how to manage them if they do happen to flare up in a conversation. But the more that we come in that place where we're open and we're asking questions, we can start to bring the energy out of saboteur negativity and more into positivity. But it can be exhausting. And I was going to ask Jeff, I said, so I'm sure you still get hijacked by your saboteurs. So how do you and go ahead and answer, Susan. I don't know if that was enough of an answer, if Jeff can probably weigh in on that also.
Yeah, and how do you get away from hijacking? Again, it's the whole concept of mindfulness and everything else is about creating that space between instinctive reaction and reasoned choice, right? And one of the things that we learned through the boot camp, is this idea of the PQ rep, just this little thing that you do that forces your brain to think about something else for just, a second.
10 seconds. Yeah.
Right.
10 seconds at a time.
So you're in a meeting, and your client who's an idiot, right? Doesn't want to listen, doesn't want to change, doesn't, or they want an answer. But they want the answer that they want, not the answer that's going to come from the work that you do. And that triggers you because you're supposed to be a professional and an expert and everything. That's why they're paying you, and they don't want to listen. If you're full-blown hijacked, that's when you leap across the boardroom table and strangle your client and leap down their throat or whatever, right? And it's not really, it's kind of frowned upon. The idea is that, like, while you're sitting there listening to this, instead of getting all hot under the collar and going on to a slow boil, is the PQ reps, which can be a breathing exercise. It can be just, one of the ones that I know Angie's really big on is, just rub the two tips of your fingertips together and pay enough attention that you can actually feel your fingerprints. And you can do that under the table. No one can see you doing it, but it forces your brain to think, and it creates just enough space so that the saboteurs can be pushed down, and then the positive energy can come out, and you can work. And again, so it's like, 10% of what you said was useful. Let's build on that, right? The whole, yes and, and just, again, it's like mental judo, right? Where you use the energy that's coming from the other person and you turn it back and and move in a different direction. And as long as you're doing it from the perspective of help, right? And doing it from a perspective from actually caring, it's not manipulative. It doesn't feel manipulative, and because you're trying to work to solve the problem. It's, again, but these are not natural reactions, and it's really hard to do it. I mean, the hardest thing for me in those kinds of, was when you're dealing with a client. The client has an answer in their head. They called you in to verify the answer they already want to do anyway. And the line that I've started using, it's like, yeah, we respect that. We respect that as an opinion. It may be true, right? But prescription without diagnosis is called malpractice. So we have to dig into that. We have to understand, are we really solving the problem? And is that really what we should be doing? And if in the end, the client decides they want to do what they want to do, or the person you're dealing with internally within your own organization is going to do what they're going to do, accept that, can't win them all, right? You did your best, you offered the best you could. And if that's not what the customer wants or what the individual is gonna do, well, you can't save everybody. And I used to feel really bad about that, and I don't anymore, because they've made a choice. That's their choice to make, and that's cool, right? Maybe they are right. Maybe I am wrong. That's okay too, right? That's how I learn. So it's mental gymnastics, right? you know, and there was another example, and this is again, it's from another consultant. You know, they go in and you know, we want to talk to you about, you know, where's the issues and everything else. Oh, everything's fine. Okay. And his question back to the client, which I thought was really brilliant, was, okay, so you're telling me that if the board of directors gave you $1 million, you'd give it back to them? And well, no, we do that. Okay, well, let's talk about that then. Right, because the problems are there, but it's just, no, I don't want to deal with it right now, or I don't think I have the resources to deal with it right now. Well, what if you did? Let's play the what if game, play the yes and game, play the innovate game, play the explore game. And it's again, it's like mental jujitsu, but it does work to solve problems creatively, and works and generates trust.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an answer your question or not. I went off on a tangent.
I don't remember what I asked you, so it's all good. I'm sure. You know, I think so. You know, it's interesting to me because a lot of this, even what you said about, I'm not as worried about the outcome anymore when it's not, you know, what you were hoping for. And a lot of this work, I think we hang on our saboteurs, and, you know, we hang on so tight to an outcome that we're looking for, and we're afraid of that outcome not happening. And we hold tight to that. And what I've observed, and I suspect that, you know, you may have seen it yourself, Jeff, is, you know, as we work through with this idea, we're not really sure what's good or what's bad. We're not, you know, if we can think about the outcome, we've done everything that we can. We've come in from, you know, without the saboteurs leading the charge. And we know that, you know, even if we don't get that outcome that we were hoping for, there's probably something else better coming along, or we'll learn something. But ultimately, when we go in with, we're not holding on as tightly to the reins, we're actually more likely to have the outcome we were looking for in the first place. Like, that's kind of the paradox in all of that, is that, you know, if we can learn to be okay with an outcome that's different than the one we're looking for, and that everything's going to be fine, we're more likely to actually get that outcome that we were looking for. So all of that, just being able to, you know, it's not like, I get some people say to me, oh yeah, sure, Angie, it's all about everything being just like wonderful and silver linings and all that stuff. Well, no, you know, like, there's a lot of crap going on in life that's not fun. And it's not that, and we still need to acknowledge the saboteurs. We need them to tell us something isn't going well, right? We need to know that something's needs our attention. It's, you know, the analogy we use is the hand on a hot stove, right? If I didn't feel pain when I put my hand on the stove, I wouldn't take my hand away. So I do need that alert signal to say, ouch, and move it away. And it's the same with these negative emotions. When I feel stress, when I feel anger, when I feel frustration, it's telling me something isn't going well. So I just don't stay in it, right? I acknowledge it. I say, thank you. That was, you know, something's going on here. And then I move forward from a more positive place. So it's not about ignoring the negative emotion. It's just learning to acknowledge it and move forward. Yeah. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean,
3 minutes left, just a time check.
yeah, well, confronting the negative is critical as well.
Yeah.
And you know, recognizing, you know, like there's recognizing that something that would bring maybe immediate positive results isn't in the long term a good thing to do, right? I think I mentioned to you the other day, Angie, I mean, we turned down in February about $80,000 worth of work, which in the past we would have jumped all over, right? And it's hard to turn down 80 grand worth of work. That's really, really, really hard to turn down 80 grand worth of work. But it wasn't the right work. It wasn't
sounds like the navigate power.
Exactly, right? And so it's recognizing that, yeah, while 80 grand in the bank is better than not 80 grand in the bank, spending time working on a project with you know, that isn't, you know, in the long term taking the organization in the direction we want to go, It's only money. There's lots of it out there. We can find more. And in the end, what we wound up doing was by turning that down, again, it's like, who knows what's bad and what is good, right? We turned it down. We made a conscious decision. No, we're actually not going to do this. We're going to tell them no. We turned it down. It's actually 2 different projects, but the equivalent of $80,000 worth of stuff. And immediately something else popped up that we wouldn't have noticed if we'd have been buried doing this other thing. And the stuff that and it was the right stuff, doing the right kind of thing. It's going to be brutally difficult to do, which actually makes it fun. And in the long run, way better for the organization and for us as individuals in the organization, and more lucrative in the long run anyway. But even if it wasn't, I'd still rather be doing it, right? So, and it's that, again, you said, it's that navigate power. It's like looking out from the, is this taking us towards the direction? When I look back a year down the road, will I be glad I did this? My banker will be glad, but I'm not sure I will be, right?
Success versus happiness, right? Yeah. So we are at the hour, I think. Hey, Rose, yeah. So that was fun, and we were hoping to hear more from all of you, but I hope that was interesting. And I put in the chat there that you can find us on LinkedIn if you have any follow-up questions or want to chat more. Let us know. Go ahead, Rose.
Yeah, so great discussion. I think everyone managed to get a little more information, and absolutely follow up with Jeff and Angie. Their LinkedIn pages are linked on the event page, so you can go right to them. And thank you so much for being our amazing presenters today.
Thanks, Rose.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
And we'll see you all at Beers at Piers on Thursday night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you.